You have been taught that the harder you work, the more money follows. For a very specific reason, rooted in how your own creative system actually operates, that assumption is often exactly backward. Most people who feel financially stuck respond to it the same way. They push harder. Longer hours, more hustle, more force against the same locked door, and the door stays shut, not for lack of trying, but because the pushing itself is frequently the exact thing standing between them and what they are trying to reach. There is an invisible framework running underneath every hour of effort you spend, silently deciding which of that effort turns into results and which of it simply wears you down, no matter how much of it you add. Hardly anyone is ever given a clear explanation of how that framework works or why it so often runs against you. That changes here. This is not a case against working. It is a case against where most people aim their working. Somewhere along the way, effort became the only currency that felt honest, the belief that if you are not further ahead, you simply have not pushed hard enough yet. Rest starts to feel like guilt. Ease starts to feel suspicious, almost like cheating, as if anything that arrived without a fight cannot be trusted to stay. You can see the belief everywhere once you look for it, in the quiet pride of being busy, in the discomfort of an unscheduled afternoon, in the reflex to add one more task the moment something starts to go well, as if ease itself were the thing that needed correcting. But according to Seth, there are two entirely different systems running underneath everything you try to create in your life, including money, and only one of them was ever built to do the actual work of creation. The other exists to carry that creation into physical form, not to produce it in the first place. Knowing which one you have been leaning on changes everything about where effort should go and how much of it you actually need. A sailor who wants to go faster does not reach for oars. Picture two boats on the same stretch of water, in the same wind. One person is rowing, arms burning, shoulders locked, moving the boat a few feet at a time through sheer muscle. The other has barely moved a hand. They adjusted a sail by a few degrees, and now the wind, which was already there, already moving, asking nothing of them, is doing the actual work. Seth points to something structurally identical running underneath your physical existence. The world of effort, muscle, and cause and effect is what he calls Framework 1, the rowing. It runs on the belief that energy is limited, that a certain amount of effort produces a certain result, that more strain simply has to equal more outcome. Framework 2 is the wind. It is the deeper associative medium your physical results actually rise out of, the layer where a new client, a new opening, a new piece of timing gets arranged and delivered to you, often along paths your rowing mind never would have plotted. Seth gives a strikingly plain example of how this actually works. Want to change jobs, he says, and hold that desire without fighting it. And the new job arrives through the same arrangement your body already uses to pick up a cup you've decided to drink from. You do not consciously direct every muscle in your hand. Something underneath the decision handles it smoothly without your supervision. Framework 2 works the same way with the larger events of your life, steadily lining up the conversation, the contact, the opening, the timing, but only if nothing is blocking the line between the wanting and the getting. And this is the piece most people trip over. Fear is exactly that kind of block. Believe even faintly that reaching for more money is risky, or greedy, or unlikely to work out for someone like you, and you have jammed the connection yourself. You will still row. You will simply row against the very wind that would have carried you. And here is the part that explains the whole pattern. Whatever you believe about how results get made becomes the instruction your deeper system follows. Decide, even unconsciously, that effort is the only legitimate route to money, that ease is suspicious, that 10 hours should always outproduce 2, and you have handed Framework 2 a technique. It will hand you back results that fit that technique, and nothing outside of it. You do not lose the ability to attract the easier version of what you want. You simply stop being able to notice it was ever on offer. Here is where it gets specific, because rowing harder does something else too. You have almost certainly absorbed the idea that every minute you are not producing is a minute wasted, that rest has to be earned, that stillness is a kind of debt. Seth has a simple name for that clock you're running your life on: assembly line time. Picture an actual assembly line, workers paid by how many identical parts move past them each hour. That works fine on a factory floor, where more identical units really is the goal. But somewhere along the way, that same clock got put in charge of things it was never built to run, including how you make money. Making money is a creative process, closer to painting or writing than to stamping out parts on a factory floor. And a creative process forced onto a factory clock doesn't produce more. It produces exhaustion and a mind that starts hunting for reasons it's failing. That hunting is not incidental. It is mechanical. Left alone to run a problem entirely by itself, cut off from anything but its own worry, the effort-focused mind does not calm down the longer it works. It gets more anxious because it can only see what has already happened, never what is coming, and a mind that cannot see ahead defaults to bracing for the worst. So it does what any isolated, frightened mind does, and this is the part that costs people the most. It starts collecting evidence. Every bill becomes proof. Every slow month becomes confirmation. Every no gets filed as data about how things really are. Meanwhile, real signs of things loosening, a small opening, an unexpected contact, a piece of good timing, get waved off as too minor to count, because they do not fit the story the effort-only mind has already built and is now determined to be right about. This is why grinding harder so often makes things feel worse, not better. Even when the hours genuinely go up, you are not only working against a locked door, you are also training your own attention to notice nothing but how locked it is. This is the actual trap. Not that hard work fails to produce money. Sometimes it does. The trap is that it quietly rewires what you're able to notice, so that even when something eases up, you explain it away and you go right back to rowing harder, certain that's the only thing that has ever worked. Now look at what happens the moment you stop rowing. Nothing in your body got where it is through force. Your bones did not need supervision to lengthen. Nobody had to coach your bloodstream into circulating, and no one had to argue your childhood body into growing another inch. Seth calls this a state of grace. Growth that happens by default, without resistance, without needing to be earned through strain, from before you were ever old enough to try. He goes as far as saying it exists at the level of the cell itself, quietly certain of its own continuation, the way every living cell in you operates, as though a better tomorrow were already assumed. That default setting does not switch off in adulthood. What happens instead is that you learn, gradually and very convincingly, to override it, to treat the parts of your life still growing without effort as the exception, and the parts requiring constant force as the rule, as though grace applied to bones and blood but somehow stopped short of a bank account. The same mechanism that grew you from a child without asking your permission, that added inches to your height and knit your bones together while you slept, was never meant to stop at money. It was built to grow your bank account the exact same way, on its own schedule, without needing your force behind it. There is a related distinction in Seth's material between physically manipulating objects, hours logged, tasks completed, hustle performed, and manipulating thought itself. The first feels efficient because you can watch it happening, count it, point at it at the end of the day and say, "Look how much I did." The second, he says, is far more practical because it works one level closer to where results actually get assembled, long before they show up as anything countable. Rowing feels productive because it is visible and exhausting, and exhaustion has a way of feeling like proof. You have likely been trained, probably since childhood, to read tiredness as a kind of certificate. Proof that you tried, proof you deserve the result, proof it wasn't just luck. So the version of you that's exhausted after a week of forcing feels more honest than the version that got the same result doing almost nothing. That feeling is real. It just isn't evidence of anything except how tired you are. Adjusting the sail, shifting what you actually believe about how money reaches you, barely feels like doing anything at all. That is not a sign it isn't working. It is closer to a sign that it finally is. Rowing looks like this: forcing a conversation before it's ready, saying yes to work that drains you because no feels too risky, checking your bank balance 5 times a day as if watching it would change it. Trimming the sail looks smaller and stranger, resting without guilt on a Tuesday afternoon, following the idea that shows up out of nowhere. Instead of the one on your to-do list, saying the honest thing instead of the strategic thing. The sign that you've shifted is rarely dramatic. Usually it's just that the next useful thing arrives with less friction than you expected, from a direction you didn't plan for. This lines up with what the law of attraction describes as not chasing, but allowing. The sense that straining after money pushes it further away, while a kind of relaxed expectation lets it arrive. People who teach that idea are not describing a mood or a wish. Seth's material points at the mechanism underneath the experience. Effort and force run on framework, one's rules, limited, linear, one input, producing one matching output, nothing arriving that wasn't directly muscled into place. Allowing hands the request to framework to instead, the layer that already leans toward growth, that was never neutral to begin with, and that can arrange a result through associations no amount of rowing could have logically planned or predicted in advance. This is the mechanism behind what you already suspected was true. Every time the good thing arrived on the day you had finally stopped forcing it, or from a direction you had never thought to push toward at all. Here is what that looks like in practice. Sometime this week, catch yourself mid-grip, mid-force, mid-grind, pushing on something financial that will not move no matter how hard you push it. Before adding more effort, ask one question. Is this rowing or is this trimming the sail? Sending the 50th application out of raw panic is rowing. Pausing long enough to notice the panic and to ask what belief is steering it is trimming the sail. You are not being asked to stop working. You are being asked to notice just once whether the hand on the oar could rest instead on the rope that turns the sail those few necessary degrees. If you caught yourself recognizing exactly where you have been rowing while watching this, say which one it was in the comments. Sometimes seeing it written down is the first degree of the adjustment. You've stopped forcing? Good. But stopping the force isn't the same as catching the wind. There's one layer left. The thing that actually decides whether abundance shows up at all, for anyone, ever. It's not a strategy. It's not a technique you can practice your way into. Seth names it as the only force that has never once failed. Most people go their entire lives without finding out what it is.